Good evening and welcome to another episode of the Eve Prosper Market Show. I'm your host, Lockefox, and this is the show where we review the Vanguard release. But before we start, let's talk about some show news and to the soothing view of the Jita Undock like we do every week. First, if you guys want to follow the show, all you have to remember is Eve Prosper. That will get you to Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, and the blog. We are broadcasting both on Twitch and YouTube tonight. You can catch us every Friday, 0200, on either. And if you guys like the show and want to support us, the best place to do so is at patreon.com/EveProsper. Your contribution does mean a lot to us. It helps get tech for the show. It helps pay for subscriptions. It helps keep the lights on around here. So I really do appreciate all of our patrons. And if you can't afford to give to the show, we truly appreciate it. Beyond that, I hope you guys are following the Twitter because I've been posting up a bunch of extra graph porn and dev porn about getting the show tools updated. And last, before we move on, you guys should check out the Q4 Plex forecast I put up on the blog. I know I said I was going to have a making of this week, but things have been really busy. We'll see about getting it out next week, so keep tuned there. With that out of the way, let's move on to the news. We're going to keep the news segment really short this week. It's been a pretty quiet week other than the Vanguard release. The only big piece of news was that multi-buy was rolled back, but has since been re-released, so everything should be running normally. Also, CCP Quant was posting on the Eve Reddit this week with more graph porn showing off super capital destruction rates, pre and post Phoebe. He has some pretty interesting data there. Looks like things are on the rise. It's not just that it seems that a lot more supers are dying. It does look like, in general, more supers are dying. So it was pretty interesting. Again, every time CCP Quant posts, it's a treat. So with that, right before we were going to come on the air, actually, there's one more piece from Uriel on Twitter, Drifter Drugs. And if you guys have followed my stuff at all, you know that I'm a huge fan of boosters. And it looks like we might be getting new boosters. Now, they do right now look like variants on the existing drugs where they give the same bonus as the previous drugs, like tracking speed and capacitor modifiers and all that. But the interesting thing I saw on here is that there are no drawbacks, for one, and two, that that they all have uniform bonuses. Now, this could be real, this could be CC crystal balling, I don't know, but I do love me some boosters. So go check out Uriel's Twitter feed for more information on that. With that, let's move on to the meat of the show and get straight into Plex. I know that I'd mentioned a couple of weeks ago that the spike up to 1.3 was unstable, and we've since backed off that peak. We were at 1.25 last week, and it looks like Plex has been on sale across the internet, so the price has trimmed back down to just below 1.2. We're not quite in line with the prediction I put in together, but we'll talk about that at the end of the Plex section. I still think Plex is overvalued for the moment, but 1.2 is not drastically out there. It's only moderately unstable. If we look at the 1 year view, we still see, if we straight line between 1 billion and 1.2, that slope is still pretty steep, and it's a little hard to justify that steep a slope. We're very far off the 60-day moving average. But if we look down at the RSI, we're seeing that the prices are more in the stable bands again, which is good to see. I don't know how long this can stay, unless the price of Plex stays stable through the upcoming weeks at that new sale price. I have a hard time believing that the sales will go on for more than 2-ish weeks, and as soon as they stop, the price should spike back up about 100 million or more. If we take a look at RMT tokens, I mentioned last week that we saw this spike and crash pattern here in the multiple pilot training certificates. The drop down because of the Plex sales looks like it didn't repeat the spikiness. But again, I would keep an eye on buy orders for multiple pilot training certificates if you want to be in that market. The ability to basically get a quote unquote Plex at a decent deal is nothing to complain about. And it looks like somebody's spiking up the resculpt certificates again, but we're still nowhere close to parity with the actual value of the Aurum. Moving on, looking at the actual buy and sell spreads on Plex. Again, we're seeing a reasonably narrow band going on. We're seeing it dipping down again to 1.15 billion on a buy order, which is pretty far down. And again, I have a hard time believing that this downward pressure can stay sustained, because as soon as CCP lets off the sales, I think that we're going to rubber band right back to that 1.2, 1.3 band. It's hard to expect that players don't know how the play works anymore. That when Plex goes down in real life price, we do see the price slide down again, and we're seeing a few percentage points shaved off of Plex here. Basically, the dollars per ISK conversion rate stays relatively stable. And last, I went ahead and threw this together real quick. The Q4 prediction, I went ahead and extended the current going line. In retrospect, I probably should have used a 45-day line instead of a 60-day line to start the predictions, but my predictions are still much lower than the actual price. And again, I still think that 1.5 right now is a better price, is a more fair, more stable price. I have a real hard time swallowing this 1.2, 1.15 price as it stands right now, but Plex is going to keep climbing as long as people keep buying it. It's pretty simple economics. It doesn't really tie into much else. As long as people are willing to buy it, the price will go up. And as the price goes up, as I explained last week, we expect to see a lot of different positive pressures all feed back on themselves, where people are hoarding it to maintain their net worth, and people are buying more than they usually would to try and stave off a price increase in the future, even though stockpiling now is a pretty shitty idea. And it's also causing people to not want to buy anything else other than Plex, because we're expecting that the price of ISK against Plex is getting too devalued in some people's minds. I explained this all last week. I'm going to go explain it at longer length in a blog post eventually, so keep tuned for more. Moving on to minerals. Again, there was a post on Reddit yesterday that I went ahead and dropped in on, asking about the climb in prices. Tritanium is heading right over 6.0 recently, and I actually expected things to stay in the 5.8, under 5.8 for the next week. This rise, I think, has to do with expectations about citadels and capitals. We're not too far out of line for Tritanium rising this far, this fast, but we are in a high unstable price, and I have a hard time predicting a price over 6.0. Again, keep an eye on Tritanium. This might be a good chance if you have a high-sec miner to go and make a little bit more than you're used to. There's still the need to compress. I haven't been following the compression rates, but you should follow Nujiniko on Twitter if you guys are interested in that. Moving on to pyrite, we see it spiking slightly to almost 12 over the last week. Again, I think this is echoing what's going on in Tritanium, that demand is going up slightly, supply is going down slightly. I still think the price is a little bit high at the moment. North of 11.5 is more than I'd like to see, but we could brush up against 12 over the following week. I have a hard time believing that the price of minerals is going to go down before the new year, but it's in a difficult place to really predict which way it's going to go. And then this week's darling, I'm going to go do a victory lap about this one. Mexilon just hit 65 as of when I pulled these graphs. And boys, so if you guys were listening to the show a couple of weeks ago, I put out a price alert about Mexilon, expecting that it would hit 65 by Eve Vegas, and we're there. So my advice here, if we go take a look at the buy and sell spreads, is to go ahead and sell. I'm generally conservative when it comes to this kind of speculation, and I'd rather count my money than try to get greedy and go for 70. So it's in a little bit of a difficult spot to predict which direction it's going. Still being several weeks out from Eve Vegas means that there might still be some growth left in it, but at 65, you're pocketing at least 18% if you bought in at 55. And I would go ahead and sell. Now, again, there is the opportunity that this could do one more stair step up, but again, I think that's getting greedy in this particular case. So count your money. I'd love to hear anybody who managed to make money off of Mexilon. Go ahead and send me an email or hit me up on Twitter if you guys followed the advice and actually made any money, because I'm actually really happy about the way this prediction turned out. We'll keep watching this graph for the next couple of weeks, at least until Eve Vegas. Nullarbor has been teasing that his Citadel material blog is due to be out in 2 to 3 weeks, so that will coincide rather nicely with Eve Vegas. So 50% says to sell and just count your money. 50% says to hold and wait until Nullarbor's announcement. I would take the car instead of see what's behind door number 2, but your mileage may vary. Moving on, Isogen is staying stable. We're seeing it bounce around 100 ISK a unit at the moment. Noxium has, again, I said last week that I expect it to bounce between this 480-520 band, and right now we're on the lower end of that band and could be tracking up. If you guys wanted to buy something to flip it in the next week, Noxium would be a decent one. You're only going to see a few percentage points on this one. So if you don't have high trading skills, this one's probably not for you. But I expect it to bounce back up to about the 520 level sometime in the next 2 weeks. Zydrine finally, like I said last week, has stopped its slide. I still expected it to bottom out at 1,000 a unit, but we're seeing it stay relatively stable around 1,100. I expect to see slight downward pressure. We might see it pop up a little bit with the Capital and Citadel announcement, but I think that's a really far bet, and that Nullsec and Wormhole are outmining the demand at the moment. So I would think that this one's going to continue to slide slowly down. And last of the normal minerals is Megasite. We saw it glance against 1,400, and it's sitting at about 1,500 today. Again, nothing much to say here. I think we're going to stay stable around 1,500 for the upcoming weeks, and slow downward pressure through the end of the year. And last but not least, we're seeing Morphite, and I'd predicted last week that we'd see again a low, slow slide. That I think above 1,200 is that I think above 12,000 is a bit much, and we're seeing some of the heat come off of that. Volumes are treading back very slightly. We're at about 12,500 at the moment, so prices I think are sliding ever so slightly, but my track record on predicting Morphite is pretty poor, so I wouldn't go running to the bank quite yet. And last, just to take a look at the buy and sell spreads, we're seeing a pretty wide spread in Megasite tonight, signaling that the price might dip even lower. Same with and Pyrite is trending down as well. Again, the upward trend on Tritanium looks like it could level off, but again, it's in such a difficult spot to predict that I have a hard time really telling you guys which way it's going to go. Moving on to fuel. Fuel isotopes continue to stay pretty stable with where they were last week. Again, we still see a lot of strength in the Caldari isotopes, peaking just over 900, and everything else staying pretty much on par at 700. So again, I still don't understand why miners are not running to the ice fields to go take care of this, but it might be a factor of code pressure and availability of actual mining. We'll see what ends up happening. I've been seeing some weakness in the advanced material markets, which may pull some of the demand out of the fuel isotope market. So we'll keep a close eye on this one. And then fuel blocks, nothing huge to say here. We saw a dip in Galente, and Minmatar looks grossly overvalued at the moment. So if you can flip some real quick, it'd be a great chance to make a quick buck. Everything else looks to be in line with expectation. Amar looks a little just slightly overvalued, and Galente looks just slightly undervalued from here. Moving on to outlier analysis. We'll start where we usually do with the advanced materials. Things have been staying relatively stable. We saw a spike in Fernite carbide last week, but that's backed off. The big news here in advanced materials is ceramic fibers keep tracking down. They spiked at almost 300 back with the Aegis release, but they have been sliding and sliding and sliding. So this is where I expect to see. This is why I expect to see some demand be reduced from Caldari towers, because as these lower value, high volume reactions lose their margin, I expect people to shutter their Caldari towers in the meantime. We keep seeing titanium carbide fall. Tungsten carbide is the only one that looks relatively stable, but it's still very low. Fulleриdes had spiked, but this looks speculative. So I think that we may see some towers get offline and a lot of the heat come out of the isotope market over the coming weeks. Again, if we go look at ceramic fibers, we're bumping up against what we would expect to be the price floor of 240. But we could be going even further. I have a hard time predicting that we'd go much below 240. But again, we're in a difficult spot to predict. Another interesting one is dysprosium had been strong for several months and has been tracking down rather strongly right now, bumping up against the 70K mark. And that looks like a price floor at the moment. I think this dip below the 75K mark. I think that under 75K is a bit of a steal at the moment. Most of the indicators say that that's too low. I'm not really sure what's driving this, to be completely honest. Moving on to PI markets, we see mechanical parts on a tear. So if you guys have any in reserve, this would be a great chance to sell. We're getting up to 9,300 a unit, and I think this is going to crash pretty hard. So if you are in the market, I would be selling. I would be getting every bit of mechanical parts off my planets and getting them to market this weekend to try and cash in above 9,000. But I also expect this to pop and drop below 8,600 as an overcorrection. So if you guys want to buy in, the buy-in price I'd be watching for is something under 8,600, 8,500 if you can get it. Moving on to nanoribbons, I brought this up last week. I'm not really savvy to the way that wormhole loot particularly works. I'd blame this on C5 and C6 escalations, but it seems that according to Benjamin Mahala on YouTube, he said that those escalations actually drop blue loot instead of nanoribbons. So this might be a constraint where people are doing less industry, but with the price of nanoribbons this high, it looks like we've settled in at about 4.5 million. But it's still a very high price for what it's doing. Moving on to ships. Let's move on to ships. T3D destroyers have been very popular in the news and meta over the last couple of weeks, with a lot of hate for this FIPL. a lot of the Tech 3 destroyers have been spiking in prices. We see the Confessor tracking up over 45 million to about 47.5 million. Prices, I think this is tracking a lot of the nanoribbon price. I don't know how much of this is people really speculating. It probably has to do with actual demand more so. And then the Swiftbull, we're seeing a similar spike in price. Again, I think this has to do more with the price of components more than the an actual surge in demand. Next, moving on to the Gila. We've been tracking this for a few weeks and saw a very interesting pattern this last week. We've been seeing some spikes and lulls as we go north of 270 mil. And this week we saw it hit up against 280 million and then bomb down to under 270 million and then bounce up again and bounce down again. So I'm tempted to call this one a buy at sub 270. I would actually be watching for buy orders if at all possible, and putting a price target to sell at about 280. Again, I'm not intimately aware of how the Gila market ends up working, but this is a rather interesting pattern of consumption. We still see very stable demand, and the prices have been unstable for some reason. So this one might be worth investigating if you're looking for something to play with. Moving on, we've been tracking T3 cruisers for the last few weeks. Last week specifically, we saw a big surge in Proteuses. This week, we're seeing less of that heat. We're seeing the prices high again because of the components being high. Specifically, the Loki had a pretty big price reset, and the Proteus remains strong, and the Tengu remains strong. So this would be a pretty decent spot to be building in if you have the chops for T3 production, and you're diligent about your material supply. Now might be a decent chance to get into the T3 cruiser production market, with most hulls sitting around the 200 mil mark. Again, if we look at the Loki, we see a really high price spike that we've gone from a stable band of somewhere around 150 million all the way up to 200 million. So again, I think this is a builder's paradise, but again, keep an eye on your volumes and be careful. You may not be able to build as many as you'd like. And again, Proteus, we saw this last week. We saw a huge rise up to 240 mil, and it's tracking back down to 200. I think 200 is going to be the stable state, but again, keep an eye on this, and there might be some chance if you're a producer. Moving on, I think this is the last week we're going to directly track battle cruisers. We're seeing a couple of interesting trends going on here. Specifically, the Drake keeps tracking up at a reasonable tick, just cresting over 60 mil over the previous week. Same with the Brutix. Looks like there may have been some shortages going on. But the Drake and the Hurricane are looking like some pretty stable... There's some pretty stable demand behind them at the moment. I would keep a close eye on these, specifically if they're getting picked up in large meta choices when it comes to what people want to PvP with. The Drake and the Hurricane are looking like pretty decent winners, and the Myrmidon, the Prophecy, and the Brutix aren't far behind at the moment. So if you guys want to get your speculating chops out, I still think there's room here, but I think you have to be more of a prudent producer than a station trader at this point in the game. And then if we look at the Navy battle cruisers, there was some expectation that the Hurricane and Drake Navy issues were going to track up, but they've stayed relatively stable at their 150 and 200 million marks respectively. I actually do kind of expect the Navy variants to become popular, but I think the time to the time that it'll take to pick them up will be a bit longer as people get more comfortable with the new changes. So if you wanted to make a longer bet, review the Navy ships and see if there is a particularly convincing piece of advantage in there. I'm not much of an EFT warrior, to be completely honest, so I have a hard time picking out the specific winner in this group. But I'm a big fan of the Brutix Navy issue because of its mobility. And, I mean, the Hurricane Fleet issue has always been a powerful solo platform, but I don't know if it's going to really get legs as far as an artillery platform. So just keep an eye on those in the upcoming weeks. Moving on, we saw another very interesting spike in the Hawk this week. We saw it spike up to about 33 million a unit over the week and then come crashing down. I don't know if this was a shortage or a buyout, what exactly is going on here, but if you need to go stock up on Hawks, now is the excellent time to go do so. At about 26 million a unit, I think that's a frickin' steal at the moment. I expect them to recover back to their 27-ish area over the weekend, so get on that as fast as you can. Moving on to a couple of modules I wanted to highlight. We're looking right now at the Medium Rocket Fuel Cache Partition 2, which I honestly don't remember which bonus that was, and I'm sure the chat will jump in and tell me, but we saw this spike up to 30 million over the last couple of weeks, and has come crashing back down to the 15 million mark. I hope that's 15. I can never tell. Looks like this may have been a speculative bubble around the Drake rebalance, and now that reality is set in, people may either be selling out of their positions or buying into a different position instead. So this one was pretty interesting to watch spike and crash over the last week. And then another interesting one that flagged because I only bring it up because I expect it to never move, has been territorial claim units. We saw a spike with Aegis being released, which we would expect as the SOV system rolled out. Need to have more TCUs at hand to go claim space. But it looks like people may have overproduced it to that demand, and we're seeing the prices very low at the moment, sitting around 80 million a unit. And again, if you need them, go buy them. The volumes are extremely low, though, so I don't think this is a speculative item. I expect them to track back up to 100 eventually, but seeing as they only sell 9 to 10 a day, this isn't a really great item to just stockpile. Last, moving on to the last section, the prediction review. Going to take a look at geckos again. So I said last week that any price under 100 million was a good price, and the heat has been slowly sinking out of the gecko market. We were at about 100 million last week. We're at about 95 million this week. As far as buying in at the bottom, I have a really hard time saying that the bottom is all I know is the bottom is somewhere between 90 and 80 million. I don't know when we'll hit that bottom. I don't know exactly where that bottom is specifically, but if you are going to speculate, I have a really hard time telling you guys to buy in at 90. Now, if you need them, if you're actually going to use them in your carrier, in your Gila, and you're actually going to put them to use, I still think that anything under 100 is a good price for using geckos if you need them in your day-to-day. I just have a hard time advocating buying geckos as a money-making strategy north of 90 million at the moment. Next, we saw a spike in the bowhead. Again, looks like there has been some serious volume being moved in the last week or so. I think this partially has to do with the raised prices of minerals, and I'm not sure if it also has to do with additional demand for hyperdunking and incursions. Again, it's a hot time of year, and people who may be coming back to the game after a while, and looking for something to spice up their hangar, maybe picking up more bow heads than we usually would see. I'm having a hard time explaining really why we're staying so high over 140 at the moment, though. As of closing, we were at 1.38 billion as of closing yesterday. And with that, we're going to close up the Eve Prosper Market Show. I've been your host, Lockefox. If you want to tune into the show, all you have to remember is Eve Prosper. That'll get you to Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, and the blog. If you want to watch live, feel free to tune in at Twitch or YouTube at 0200 on Fridays. I really do appreciate all the people who do tune in live, and we do Q&A afterwards. If you want to support the show directly, feel free to stop by our Patreon at patreon.com/EveProsper. Your support means a lot to the show. It really helps us keep on the air and keep doing what we're doing here. Otherwise, I hope to see you all next week for another exciting Eve Prosper show. Again, I've been your host, Lockefox, and I will see you all next week.